Well, not everybody is here. There's still a lot of gridlock, but thank you very much for coming. My name is Vincent Everts. I'm one of the people who founded the conference, and I will be your chairman today. And we're going to be working really hard to get some real knowledge about all the blockchain cases. So my goal is to basically introduce you quickly and to also tell you the reason we came of this conference. And that is about 6 years ago, of course, the Bitcoin came up and it became very popular. That was in 2014, 13, 14. I started the first conference. And because, I mean, who knows a lot about payments here? Who's really good in it? Okay. Every time I know more about payments, it is amazing that it works. Especially if you do international, transactions. The way these banks settle things, it is just unbelievable that stuff works. It's so complex. Everybody has funds all over the world, and before they settle, it's really... And then we saw the Bitcoin, and it was really going, you need money, I'm sending it to you, it's disappearing in my account, goes to yours, and it works worldwide, everywhere, and in 10 minutes there. That's in 2014. Then immediately we started to look at other applications, so the next conference was called the Blockchain Conference, and we talked about Ethereum and about the smart contracts. And then last year we were talking about, hey, okay, the technology is fine, but what do we do with it? How are we going to use it for production? And the goal for me is always to have existing companies. How can they use this blockchain technology? I mean, I think we in Europe and we in the Netherlands especially, we have fantastic, wonderful, incredibly big companies who are the backbone of our society, and they need to innovate. I mean, it's not only for small companies who are startups, but especially for the big companies who basically are the backbone of our society who need to innovate. So that's why this conference is there. I want to ask you all to interface with, go to big.squiffer.com. You can scan this QR code, and if you can type in your name, and then also up there is the info. You can click on info and you can see the program. So you can see what we're doing now. You can click on every block, and then you can click on every person, and you get immediately the information about the speaker. So that is about Squiffer. Let's see if it works. Can we change to the Squiffer screen for a second? We have 98 people, so we can have a lot more. And so you basically, it's big19.squiffer.com. You can type it in, or the QR code. Let's ask some questions. Okay, first question. How did you get here? The car, the explosion car. Oh, there's no EV. I didn't ask how many electric cars. I mean, we still use oil. It's beautiful. We still have these explosion cars, the diesel, benzene. In 10 years, that will go radically. In 10 years, they will be totally different. More than 50% of the new cars will then be electric. In 20 years, it will be mostly electric. And we have 56% public transport. Fantastic. Next one. Okay. Let's see. I just had a great time at Money 2020. What was it? I'm missing something. What happened? Oh, the balance, yeah. Yeah, I was at Money 2020, and there was the European Women Payment Network, and it was there were 300 women, and actually you'll see also some very powerful women in state. If the rules need to be kept, the women are in charge. All the central banks I've met at Money 20 were all central banks. So we're still extremely, divided, but I think the quality is much better on the female side. Okay, next one. Okay. In payment, next year, in 10 years, will payment be, the blockchain technology will be important, moderate, hardly, no. I mean, I was talking to all these central banks. If we can get a digital euro, a euro on the blockchain, this whole settlement thing could be so easy, could be so much easier. So we have a slight majority who thinks it's going to definitely be very important and moderately, and there's a very small group which says a lot less. Okay, next one. How much do you know? was funny, we had the blockchain for dummy sessions in the morning, and I heard some people saying it was excellent, Badr, thank you very much, great job, wonderful. And so these 50 people which were there can explain. The first time we had the conference, we did blockchain for dummies, we had like 2/3 of the people went to the blockchain for dummies sessions, then 1/3, and now we have only 50 people. But I still think that a lot of people cannot explain blockchain in a very good, easy way to on a birthday or to a colleague. So we have 70% starting, intermediate, and we have 6% Satoshis. Great, next one. What's your involvement with the blockchain projects? There's still people who do not use their mobile phone. It's really interesting. Okay, learning, proof of concept, ICO, production blockchain. That's really great. That's much higher than last year. And we have the experts and others. So that's really great. The biggest category is people who are now working on production, who are blockchain in production. So that is wonderful. Wonderful. That's great news. Go, next. And for what reason are you interested in the blockchain? And then you can type in something. I want to know, what do you want to learn today? What do you want? What do you find interesting? Okay. Money, money. Okay. Let's see. Understand. You want to understand what happens today? Blockchain for good. Destroy the banks. We still have people who want to destroy the banks with. It's really the biggest amount of blockchain projects are now, in banks. And but they don't seem to be they don't seem to be intimidated by the blockchain. Real working examples, ecosystem, single source of truth. That's of course the most wonderful thing about this whole ledger thing. We love the technology, different parties drawn together, decentralized. Okay, you're doing a good job. Can you now select the top 5 for you? Go to the next one and select the top 5. So then we know for the speakers what they want to do. Okay, money. Well, we're out of the crypto. I forgot to ask, who has, can you show me who has crypto in their own wallet? Who has crypto? Yeah. Okay, so we had a really nice little winter. And now it's going up again. Okay. Energy applications. Wow. Understand what happens today? Trade, business model, it will be the future. Make use of it. That is really, make use of it, business model, understands, and make it work. Okay, wonderful. I think that was the last one, or do we have one more, another question? No, that was the last question. Very good. Again, can we switch to my, back to my thing? Because if you want to see, we're now, Bart Melling from Gartner, he gave a presentation what happened in the boardroom. Last year it was about 30% who thought it was really important, but only 5% was working on it. And we're now in the hype cycle. We're now past the crypto. The crypto technology is now basically past the hype cycle and is now being implemented. It's mature technology. This hype cycle, the way it works, this is people have unrealistic expectations. Here then we have the delusionment. And then basically from here on, you have like a complementary currency. That is basically, it becomes mature, the technology works, and we're really implementing it. Now, this is like blockchain in government, blockchain in banking is going down, blockchain in general. But this is from last year, June. Next month, the new hype cycle will come up, and there will be a lot of things. Blockchain will be ending up here, and will be going into the maturity phase. So that's really interesting. And also here you can see that Gartner expects that in 2 to 5 years, that was last year, that a number of technologies will become important and be moderately important, and then 5 years will be a little longer. And transformational, of course, the institutions are so important and change relatively slowly, so that will take a while. Then you read about all the projects in blockchain are basically failing. Just like if you go to Forbes, it all fails. Well, if you then read a little bit longer, it's all about the ICOs where 85% fails. But if you then look at one step further, then all the big companies, all the big public companies are exploring blockchain. Doesn't matter if it's Walmart who is exploring, the big energy companies, all the tech companies, Amazon has blockchain in a box, Microsoft has it. But everywhere, all over the different industry, people are exploring now blockchain projects. And even people who really hate it, JP Morgan is very much, has very much go public to say that it doesn't work. And now they have their own coin, and they have a lot of projects they do together, and blockchain is really now changing their back office. And they do $6 trillion a day of transactions, and they say, hey, for real-time settlement, it's a real good tool, and they're now into this project. And the big interest now, of course, is also stablecoins. Stablecoins is really, that's what a lot of projects are working on together, and that's happening in the normal financial industry. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple of projects which I went through, because I cannot talk about all the projects. There's hundreds and hundreds of projects, but I'm just going to tell you a couple of them which I basically went through today. And does anybody know Ping An? This is an extremely well-educated audience. 15% of the people know it. So Ping An has 650 million people insured, has 350 million people, but provides basic medical insurance to 350 million Chinese people. And they have an app. They can see doctors, do video, and do get everything. It's for about $1.50 a month. And they do all the primary care and the secondary care. It's hundreds of millions of people. They have huge platforms. They have a bank with $1 trillion capital. And Jonathan was the CIO, the CEO of Citicorp worldwide. So he's now working for Ping An. So it's like everybody knows Tencent, everybody knows Alibaba, but this guy is just as big. It's a huge company, and they also have 100,000 people making technology. And he basically told me at the digital insurance agenda, which is next month, where you have about 1,000 cases being talked about. Sorry, that's 150 cases. And he said, we put 400 banks in China from an immutable system, namely paper, to the blockchain. So let's see how he describes that. Connects a lot of banks in China. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of second-tier banks in China. They range in size from, let's say, $5 billion of balance sheet to $150 billion, so not all of them are small. And historically, some of those guys are long assets, some are short assets, long liability short. So there was a system to allow assets to shift assets and liabilities around to basically balance their positions. It was
like Swift in like the Swift system,
sort of like that. I guess it was paper-based, and it would take weeks to settle each transaction. And we took this as our first major blockchain effort. We used the Hyperledger platform from IBM, and we've created a platform that's now done $2 trillion of transactions.
So the interesting thing is this guy, it's a fantastic interview where he basically describes how he did it. 400 banks did everything in paper, and now they're doing real-time settlements. Let's do that here in Europe. But they did that in 18 months. So I thought that was last year, June. Then if you look at the public blockchains, we had the crypto winter, everybody's thing is coming back. That was interesting. There's some news about Bitcoin, that it is stable, it works, the value is one thing. Ethereum is now working really hard to go to proof of work, multiple transactions, discarding. The public chains are not up there yet to do thousands and thousands of transactions per second. They're slow, and they're having a couple of big things to do before they can be used for real serious work. XRP. Really interesting XRP. We all Ripple. We all talked about it. The banks are using that, right? Every week you see that contracts are that this bank and that bank are using Ripple, right? But the idea was to basically say, hey, I'm sending you money. It first goes to XRP, and then it basically arrives in your own currency in your bank. Real-time settlement. No, all the banks are not using that. They use a sort of a SWIFT system. They do back and forth. They say, hey, there's money coming your way. Oh, really? Yes, it's confirmed, and that's better than SWIFT. But then the money is not transferred, and they just have to use accounts, and they have to take money which they have in the bank in Brazil, for example, to pay the actual client. So there's some money there. Interesting. Has anybody ever heard of Bitcoin SV? Who? Okay, those are the inside. This guy, Greg Wright, he claims to be Mr. Satoshi. And he made his own. He made his own. He made his own version of Bitcoin. It's called Bitcoin SV. And what is the biggest? What is the biggest change from that Bitcoin? From that version of Bitcoin? Blocks of 128 megabytes. He can now do 3,000 transactions a second. Next year he will be able to do 30,000 transactions a second. And the guy is unbelievable smart. He's really smart. 95% of the people think he's a trader, but of the core developers of Bitcoin, about half of them say this guy is the real Satoshi. And I asked him, saying, who wrote this paper? Who was involved in writing the Bitcoin paper?
The paper was primarily me.
How many people were involved in the process?
The paper was primarily me. There were different iterations going back. My document management's shit, so there are bits and pieces of changes all over.
But how many people? It's mainly you, and how many other people were involved?
For the paper, me. Other people looked at it for me, and
the guy. But you can see the guy has about 4 PhDs and about 18 different masters. I mean, he is absolutely, if you talk to him, he knows everything about it. He can tell you all why the reason was. And everybody says, okay, get that million Bitcoins which you have, basically put that into. So there's controversy, but he's really smart and he's making this Bitcoin SV. So watch that thing, because it is an amazing production chain. So there's a lot of things happening. It's now the best performing asset. Bitcoin is now the best performing asset of any asset this year. You know, we don't talk about last year, but we talk about this year. It went up from $3,700 to $7,700, so it's going up. And Lightning. And Lightning is now really nicely developed. Lightning is that you can do millions of transactions with Bitcoin. It's a secondary layer solution, and that people can open channels and basically do a lot of trades. So Amazon can open one Bitcoin channel, Lightning channel, do a lot of transactions, and from time to time settle it on the blockchain. And that is now, those nodes are going up, the transactions are going up. It's really instant, and it really doesn't cost much money, and it certainly doesn't cost any energy. So that's interesting to watch for the future. Lightning, remember that word. It's getting into production. There's a bunch of nodes. Then other people came on my path, and he said, I got a call out of nowhere from Roel Pieper. Does anybody remember Roel Pieper? Yeah, Roel Pieper basically came from Silicon Valley to preach us the gospel, and I worked for him as a seller in venture. And he says, you have something completely missing in your conference. He says, it's a great conference, good, very good, practical, but you are missing something. I said, okay, Roel, what is it?
Investment for blockchain applications of various kinds. And then you make the very strange move and you switch back to WhatsApp or Viber or Telegram. And that is a complete oxymoron, because you've just, gone back 180 degrees on your premise of security and privacy, because you've now opened the door again. So it doesn't make any sense to do blockchain if you not understand how to do secure messaging.
Okay, but okay, so he now lives in Kiev. He lives in Kiev. He has 2 babies, and he's basically, and the Russian government, all the governments are basically chasing him, and he really is totally crazy about privacy. So he's now making Project Priva, a WhatsApp on the blockchain, which cannot be listened to. So even these people, everybody is investing. The amount of money which is now invested in blockchain solution is exploding again. This year it exploded again. Then, so this is my personal journey in blockchain. I met Victoria Cleland, and she is from the Bank of England. She was in charge of cash. Do I have still 9 minutes, or am I already 9 minutes late? I'm probably fingers out. I'm sorry. But Victoria was in charge of cash, and now she's in charge of remaking the whole payment system of the Bank of England. It's from 1996, and she says, it's so old, like my mobile phone, I'm going to completely redo the payment system of the UK. And she considered using blockchain for it. they didn't go for it, but she's now integrating DLT solutions so that anybody wants to connect to the payment system of the UK central bank can use DLT solutions. We're saying in the panel that one of the things you did was thinking about blockchain and DLT systems and to integrate it. How is the thinking about DLT and blockchain in the Bank of England?
So in terms of the payment system, we did think about whether or not we should be building the new system entirely on DLT, decided actually at the moment it hasn't been proven enough in terms of scalability, some of the privacy issues and things, but we are always thinking what next, what about the future? So last year we ran some proofs of concepts to really understand if a firm was using DLT, could they connect to our real-time gross settlement system, and found that they could. There are a few tweaks they'd like to help us sort of make it even easier for them, but I think in our view we weren't ready to use it, but we don't want to stop other people using DLT if they want to.
Yeah. And so that was really interesting that that the central banks are now all thinking about how can we use blockchain to basically run our stuff. How is it in Holland? Kristen van Driel is responsible for all the blockchain projects, and she says there's been an amazing shift in thinking about blockchain and cryptocurrencies in the Dutch central bank. Oops. Developed over the years from crypto to blockchain and to the next step.
That's very interesting. I think when we started in 2015, where we were practically the only central bank working on this, but also
you made your own guilder.
And we made our own guilder, yes. Also because we thought that it would happen in retail payments, the first blockchain experiments. These days you see more of a movement to the wholesale payment infrastructure. There are a lot of interesting experiments going on there with clearing and settlement, doing that in a more efficient maybe and less costly way. So we're now currently thinking about looking at that together with other central banks doing a lot of blockchain experiments.
Are there a lot of central banks thinking about this issue?
A lot, yes, a lot. And we're doing also experiments. The Dutch National Bank is doing experiments with the ECB, for example. IMF is doing, of course, their coin, blockchain. The Singapore is doing that. Of course, Canada, Sweden, Germany, Austria.
Everybody's working on. They're now actually today, all the central banks, about 40 of them are now at the Dutch Central Bank together, and they basically are only talking about how can we use blockchain technology and DLT. How can we use that? So that's very interesting. It's mainstream innovation business. Legislation issues, we'll talk about it today. I mean, I just want to say one thing. Does anybody know the Financial Action Task Force? It's a really important task force, okay? And they just made recommendations how to use cryptocurrency, and that means they propose a very draconian measure that you have to know exactly where the money comes from, all the chain, and where it's going to, and that you have to have all the information of who it is. And that is, if that is implemented, there's nobody who could ever. It's not only that you have to say this money came from this person now, but where did the money came in 5 times before that. It's just like, even with the blockchain, you can track it. I mean, that's much better than with the normal system. It was interesting. $2 trillion a year is into whitewashing and terrorist financing. 2 trillion. Of that, 2% is flagged. Of that, 2% is a suspicious error report is generated. This is suspicious. And 2% of that is basically basically people get convicted. It's 2% of 2% of 2%. It's really nothing. And how much work do you have in the banks to basically do this whitewashing and terrorist financing to implement that, right? It's a huge amount of work, and it's 2%. The result is 2% of 2% of 2%. Okay. If this one works, the Americans are now running it, and the Europeans don't want to do it, so it's going to be very interesting if this is going to work. Okay. I have to stop. This guy is really interesting from Ingenico. I won't let him here, but he's saying Ingenico is a big payment provider. They're coming with standard blockchain projects for first to do tracking and tracing for a supply chain, a standard product for KYC, and to basically give people their own identity, and a standard product to make a stable coin. That's the kind of products people are working on, and they're doing that on a scale and with a cost which is really easy that they're doing it. So Microsoft is, of course, in it together in the identity. And the last thing, just want to tell you, this is WeChat. They're doing $12 trillion in WeChat. 12 trillion. And I thought it was also interesting, 9 trillion of that is person to person. It's person to person, and only 3 billion is paying is e-commerce. And 1.2 billion the daily transaction on WeChat. So that's really, and 460 billion transactions in one app. And that's basically now what Facebook is working on. Wouldn't it be fun that we can have all this wonderful opportunity? And the guy who's basically running it is the ex-CEO of PayPal. And they're basically using DLT technology to make that possible. So there's a lot of things happening in this whole blockchain world. Okay, we have the program of the day. You can see it. We're going to start with all kinds of business cases around blockchain. And we're going to talk about the regulation. So that's basically what we're going to do next. Some exciting apps or exciting applications where hundreds of millions of dollars are being traded on the blockchain. The VECT is really interesting. Then next to it, we have alternative ways to handle money. So that Marleen Everts has her own exchange. Is really working very well to go public on the chain. It's really wonderful. And we have the first STO, the security token, and it's from Berlin, it's from Bitbond, and it's approved by the regulator. Regulation is, of course, very important. We're talking about that. And then we have Connie Dorstein, who goes with Leonard Franken from the Dutch Authority for Financial Market, and Petra Hielkema from the Dutch Central Bank. So that's the first part we're going to do. Then we have all the different, and Financial Dagblad wrote about it actually today, about our conference and about what we're going to talk about. And then we have the different tracks. Connie Dorstein has an unbelievable amount of very, very, very interesting cases. I really like the way ABN has a huge amount of initiatives. ING has a lot. Rabobank is really interesting because they have something which is not their core banking functionality, but it's about personnel, and it's about identity. It's really interesting. And then InsurTech, we're going to talk about InsurTech. There's a huge amount of happening in InsurTech technology. And then the government, we have people from India, and Marloes is saying how it's working all around the world, what happens in the Netherlands. Richard Kastelein is here, who's been involved in this world a lot. He knows everything about the ICO business, and he's now in the on the European board of INATABA, the International Association for Trusted Blockchains, the European association. So we're going to see how all the governments are working with that. And Leonard is joining us too. And Tanvi Ratna is DC, basically talks about what happens in India. We always loved when the big numbers are there. And technology, Frans Kemper from IBM is going to look beyond the pretty faces. What kind of technology do you have to implement? And then we have a wonderful sustainability track. I mean, it's really interesting. This blockchain for good is really interesting. I mean, lots of things happen on the edge. And my favorite is the last one is from Joe Potosky from Parity. And Parity was here to speak a couple of years ago. They worked on Ethereum. And it's a beautiful case of in Jordan where refugees get their own wallet. Based on Ethereum and Enterprise, they get their own wallet, but they don't need a phone, and they pay at the supermarket with their iris scan. The private key is connected to the iris scan, and it's hundreds of thousands of transactions, saves a lot of money, it's much more secure. It's really interesting track. And then we're going to talk about how do you make these projects, and one of the things you need to do is building alliances. And of course, if you make your own, if you use blockchain for yourself, that's one thing. If you do blockchain with all the people who are in your ecosystem, is another thing. But if you have competitors working together with each other, how do you govern it? How do you set it up? Who pays for it? Really important part. And then we have the challenges of building alliances. We have some great speakers there. And then at the end, we have the Dutch situation. What's happening in Holland? Rutger van Zuidam. We have Linda from KLM. Ben Woldering. We have Shell, Sabine from Shell. And then we're going to look at the end. Dave says, I'm going to have such a nice, quiet, I'm going to listen, Dave Birch, and then he's going to talk about his new baby. It's not tokenization economics, he did that last year, but it's now about AI. He's really crazy about AI. So we'll see about how AI and blockchain goes together. And I'm also going to talk to this guy, Professor Talit, and he's a UK professor. He fell off his horse, he's in the hospital now, so he's not here. I'm going to talk to him with Skype. But he is in the e-commerce work group of the Chinese government, and he says 70% of all the blockchain projects now are happening in China. They're using it to reorganize their government to make it less corrupt, and he's saying the whole e-commerce system is really transformed there in China because of blockchain. It's really interesting. And then we have Dave Birch, and then we have worked really hard, and we're going to get a drink. So that's what's happening. I hope it's enough for you today, because and we do a lot of interaction with that. We do a lot of interactions during the day, ask the questions. So that's I'm looking forward to that. Okay, so make sure you have Squiff already.